I pulled into my driveway that Wednesday afternoon, expecting the kind of quiet I usually came home to. Not two police cruisers idling with lights flashing a muted red across my front porch. Officer Briggs stepped out first, hand hovering near his belt, asking me to stay where I was as though I'd just broken into my own life. My keys dangled from my fingers, still warm from the ignition, while my mind scrambled to understand how walking into my own home had suddenly turned into a crime scene staged for an audience I never invited on this strange day. Behind the officers, my nosy HOA neighbor Karen stood at the edge of her lawn with her phone raised, recording like she'd finally caught the scandal she'd been hunting for months. Her smug expression only tightened the knot forming in my chest as Officer Briggs asked for identification, his tone apologetic but firm. Through the living room window, I saw my daughter freeze mid-step, worry spreading across her face as she realized something was wrong. I told the officers they could check whatever they needed, but inside, a sharp unease whispered that Karen wasn't just reporting me. She was setting me up. Karen had always found ways to make life unbearable, from petty HOA complaints about my mailbox to snide comments about my lawn care. Every minor detail became a battleground, each complaint another arrow aimed straight at my peace of mind. I had tried to ignore her, thinking the best response was silence, but she seemed to thrive on my frustration. Every interaction was calculated, each smile masking a gleeful cruelty that made neighbors whisper and sigh. I had moved to this neighborhood for a fresh start after losing my wife, hoping my daughter Sophia could heal in a place of normalcy, but Karen's presence turned what should have been safe streets into a minefield. The officers glanced at each other, their expressions revealing their doubts about the so-called threat. But Karen's confidence was relentless, a damning smirk that suggested she believed she had already won. My stomach churned as I realized this was more than harassment. It was weaponized manipulation, and the stage had been set right on my own property. Officer Martinez stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel with a rhythm that seemed almost theatrical in the tension-filled silence. He examined Karen for a moment, then looked at me with an apologetic nod, as if acknowledging that sometimes civility is tested in the strangest ways. "We'll need to confirm a few details," he said, keeping his voice neutral, professional, and careful. Karen's eyes flickered with irritation, clearly impatient with the delay in her self-declared triumph. I opened the gate, letting the officers inspect the perimeter, all while silently recounting the subtle signs I had ignored over the past few weeks. Missing packages, doors slightly ajar, faint traces of someone else's presence that I had chalked up to forgetfulness. Each minor incident now clicked together like pieces of a puzzle I had been too naive to see forming. The sense of violation was suffocating, and I could feel Sophia's eyes on me through the window, silently pleading for reassurance. As the inspection continued, Officer Martinez's gaze lingered on subtle anomalies, the kind you notice when trained to look for inconsistencies. A side window left unlatched, faint scuff marks on the hardwood floor, and the faint aroma of something unfamiliar in the air made him pause. Karen's protestations grew louder, but there was a tension in her voice that betrayed her growing unease. I remained calm, presented myself as a homeowner I'd always been, yet inside, adrenaline surged through every vein, warning me that the situation could escalate beyond a simple misunderstanding. It was then that the first seeds of realization took root. Karen wasn't just a meddling neighbor. She had crossed boundaries I didn't even know she was capable of crossing. The officers' quiet murmurs and exchanged glances confirmed what I had feared, and a chilling premonition settled over the front porch. Something was about to be revealed, something that would upend the carefully constructed order of our lives. By the time the officers requested to come inside, my heart pounded against my rib cage like a warning drum. Karen's protest had shifted from confident declarations to sharp, defensive interjections. She claimed she had the right to be there, invoking the HOA as her shield, but the faltering in her tone betrayed her. Officer Martinez gave her a measured look, one that carried the weight of authority and skepticism. I stepped aside, letting the door swing open, and for the first time, a terrifying clarity struck me. The chaos outside was nothing compared to what might be happening inside. Every corner of my home, every familiar object, seemed suddenly suspect, as though Karen had turned my sanctuary into her playground without my consent. The officer's slow, deliberate steps across the threshold heightened the suspense, each creak of the floorboards echoing through the tense silence. Inside, the evidence of Karen's audacity became undeniable. A pillow and blanket sat on the living room couch as though it had been slept on, dishes cluttered the sink, and food from our pantry was missing. Bathroom toiletries that were not ours lined the counter, and subtle rearrangements of furniture hinted at someone claiming ownership over our space. A bedroom door, previously closed, was gently nudged open by Officer Martinez, revealing more belongings that could only belong to someone who had been living there. Karen's face contorted with panic and rage as the truth came into sharp focus. The officers quickly assessed the situation, radioing in for backup, while keeping control of the escalating scene. Sophia's eyes, wide with fear and disbelief, met mine through the living room, and I silently vowed to protect her from this violation. When confronted, Karen faltered under the officer's questioning. Her initial claims of temporary oversight and good intentions crumbled, replaced by stammering admissions. 3 weeks, she had been staying inside our home without permission, hiding behind a fabricated narrative of HOA responsibility. The officer's calm but authoritative demeanor left no room for denial, and Karen's defiance collapsed into panicked desperation. Handcuffs replaced her smug confidence, and neighbors who had gathered to watch now witnessed the unraveling of her carefully constructed facade. Filming on phones and whispering in awe, they documented the public exposure of her trespassing, a spectacle born from months of harassment and manipulation. In the aftermath, charges of trespassing, breaking and entering, and theft were filed, and Karen's influence within the HOA quickly evaporated. The neighborhood, once wary of her, now breathed a collective sigh of relief, while apologies from misplaced trust trickled in from those who had once sided with her. Measures were taken to secure our home, reinforcing locks and installing surveillance to ensure such a violation could never recur. And through it all, Sophia's tentative smiles returned, the weight of fear lifted by the assurance that we were finally safe. The lesson was stark but clear. Boundaries exist for a reason, and those who attempt to exploit power and deceit will ultimately face consequences. Justice, in its slow but certain form, had arrived.